He never understood why his fiance's dog hated him so deeply, especially every single time he tried to kiss her. Until the night before their wedding when he walked down that hotel corridor and heard something through that door that shattered his entire world. It was the evening before the biggest day of Nathan's life. The kind of evening a man spends years dreaming about. The hotel near the beach was grand and glowing, all polished marble floors and golden light spilling through tall glass doors. A black car pulled up slowly to the entrance and the door swung open. Out stepped Diane, radiant, laughing softly into her phone, her luggage already being handled by the hotel porter. And right beside her, pressed close to her leg, was Rex. A large, dark, or a powerfully built Rottweiler with amber eyes that moved slowly and deliberately across every face in the vicinity until they landed on Nathan, who had just stepped through the hotel's front doors with a wide smile and open arms. The smile lasted about 4 seconds. Rex saw Nathan coming. The dog's body went rigid. His tail dropped, his ears pressed forward. And then, before Nathan could even reach Diane for a hug, Rex lunged with a bark so sudden and violent that 2 hotel guests near the entrance actually screamed. His teeth found the fabric of Nathan's trouser leg and locked on. He pulled backward, growling low, like something territorial and ancient had been triggered inside him. "Rex, stop it! Rex!" Diane yanked the leash hard. A hotel porter rushed over to help. Rex finally released the fabric and stood back, still growling, eyes fixed on Nathan with an intensity that felt less like animal behavior and more like a personal warning. Nathan stepped back, heart hammering, embarrassment burning across his face. He straightened his trousers and exhaled slowly. "Why does he always do this?" Nathan asked, his voice tight. "Every single time I get near you. Every time I try to kiss you. It's like he's waiting for it." Diane stepped forward and touched his cheek with her free hand. "Baby, stop. He's just protective. He loves me. He'll settle down once he gets used to you properly." "Diane, we've been together for 2 years," Nathan said, lowering his voice so the hotel staff couldn't hear. 2 years, and it's getting worse, not better. Other people can walk right up to you and he just sits there. But the second I get close, he loses his mind. Why only me? What does he know that I don't? Diane laughed lightly. "What kind of question is that? He's a dog, Nathan. He's not hiding secrets." She took his hand and pulled him gently toward the entrance. "Come on. Tomorrow we get married. Tonight let's just enjoy being here." Nathan looked back once at Rex, who was now being led inside by a porter. The dog turned his head and held Nathan's gaze all the way through the lobby doors. Nathan turned away and said nothing more. But somewhere quiet and instinctive, something in him had already begun to wonder. They rode the elevator up to the floor where Diane's suite was. When the porter opened the door, Diane gasped and covered her mouth. Nathan had spent the better part of a week organizing it quietly. The suite was enormous, draped with fairy lights along every curtain rail, a red and white balloons floating gently at the ceiling, a long white banner across the wall reading, "Last night before you say I do," in gold script. On the center table sat a bottle of champagne and an ice bucket, a box of imported Belgian chocolates that Diane had loved since her time living in Canada, and a small velvet pouch containing a bracelet Nathan had engraved with the coordinates of the restaurant where they had their first date. "Nathan," Diane whispered, turning to look at him with shining eyes. "This is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever done for me." He smiled and pulled her into a hug. "You deserve all of it," he said into her hair. Rex walked to the far corner of the room, turned twice, lay down, and stared at Nathan from across the floor without blinking. Nathan pretended not to notice. 20 minutes later, his phone buzzed. His best man and closest friend since university, a sharp-tongued, warm-hearted man named Cole, had arrived in the lobby downstairs with the rest of the groomsmen. Nathan kissed Diane on the forehead, told her he would be back, and took the elevator down. What he found in the lobby made him laugh out loud. Cole had not come alone. He had come with a mission. Wrapped gift boxes were stacked in someone's arms. A man stood holding a small trumpet. Another was carefully balancing a massive heart-shaped cake on a rolling cart. Cole stood in the middle of it, all grinning like a man who had been planning this for weeks because he had. "Operation Corridor Surprise," Cole announced quietly when Nathan reached them. Full execution in 3 minutes. Nathan shook his head, smiling. Then he was holding a second bouquet of roses he had picked up from the hotel florist downstairs. Fresh red ones. She's going to think we've lost our minds. That's the goal, Cole said. They took the elevator up in two groups. They moved down the corridor as quietly as a group of excited men carrying a cake and a trumpet could manage. Nathan held up his fist when they were 10 feet from Diane's door. Everyone stopped. He could hear her voice. She was on the phone. He almost moved forward and knocked anyway. But then the tone of her voice reached him. Private. Low. The kind of voice people use when they believe they're completely alone. He stayed still. Can you believe he was complaining about Rex again? Diane was saying, and then she laughed. Not a warm laugh. Something looser, unbothered. Or, he said Rex gets too aggressive whenever he kisses me. He's asking why the dog only reacts to him. Nathan lowered his fist slowly. Cole watched his face. He doesn't even realize, Diane continued, and her voice softened into something almost affectionate. But not for Nathan. Rex is just jealous. That dog sees everything. He knows things Nathan will never figure out. Nathan's chest tightened. What does that mean? Honestly, Diane said, and her voice shifted again into something flat and practical. Nathan works all the time. He's away constantly. Half the time I feel like I'm living alone anyway. And besides, he could never satisfy me the way Rex does. The corridor went completely silent. Nathan did not breathe. Cole's expression froze. The trumpet player looked at the floor. I've stayed this long because of the house and because of everything he's built, Diane continued, her voice casual, almost bored. But I'm not staying forever. I'll marry him, give it some time, and then I'll file for divorce and take everything I'm entitled to. Half his assets, the house, all of it. My lawyer already knows what to do. The bouquet of roses dropped from Nathan's hand. It hit the marble floor with a soft sound that nobody in that corridor would ever forget. And after all of that, Diane said, her voice dropping into something genuine for the first time, I go straight back to Ryan. He's the only man I have ever actually loved. Ryan knows it. I know it. This whole thing with Nathan is just the plan. Nathan stood in the middle of that corridor and felt the ground leave him. Not metaphorically. His legs actually stopped working correctly and he put one hand against the wall to stay upright. The roses lay scattered at his feet. He was staring at the door like it had just told him something in a language he would spend the rest of his life trying to unhear. Cole was beside him in 2 steps. Nathan. His voice was barely a sound. Nathan, look at me. Nathan turned, and Cole saw it. The tears. Already there, already falling. The eyes of a man whose entire understanding of his own life had just been revised in 60 seconds. Nathan, let's go, Cole said quietly, putting a hand on his shoulder. Come on, let's go. Nathan let himself be steered away from the door. The groomsmen parted silently. The cake stayed on its cart in the middle of the corridor. The trumpet player stood still, instrument at his side. I'm not knowing where to look. The roses stayed on the floor. And behind that door, Diane laughed again at something Ryan had said, completely unaware that the man she was about to marry had just heard every word. That night was the longest of Nathan's life. Cole stayed with him. He didn't push for conversation. He just sat in the chair by the window of Nathan's room and was present, which was the only thing that helped even slightly. Nathan sat on the edge of the bed still in his evening clothes and stared at the middle distance for what felt like hours. He kept replaying the audio in his head. The casual tone, the boredom, the practicality of it. She wasn't angry at him. She didn't hate him. She had simply arranged him the way you arrange furniture, useful until you redecorate. He could never satisfy me the way Rex does. That line specifically. He turned it over and over. He thought about the dog's behavior, the jealousy, the way Rex always knew. Every embrace, every kiss, Rex had appeared, growling, warning, watching. Had the dog been reacting to something Nathan couldn't see? Had Rex known something this whole time? His mind went to places he didn't want it to go, and he forced it back. I need to think, he said to Cole. Take your time, Cole said. The wedding is in 14 hours, Nathan said. I know. My mother flew in from Melbourne last week. She hasn't been back from Australia in 3 years. She came for this. I know, Cole said again. My uncle drove 12 hours from up north. Half these people haven't seen each other in years. They came for this. Cole leaned forward. Nathan, what do you want to do? Nathan was quiet for a very long time. Then he said, I want her to feel it, in front of every single person who came to watch us get married. I want her to feel exactly what I felt standing in that corridor. Cole looked at him steadily. Then let's plan. They sat together until nearly 3 in the morning. Morning came the way it always does, indifferently. The sun through the curtains looked exactly like wedding day sun. Birds, blue sky, a light breeze off the water. Nathan showered. He shaved carefully. He put on his wedding suit, a dark navy three-piece he had fitted twice. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror for a long, quiet moment. Then he went downstairs. His groomsmen moved around him carefully. Nobody asked questions. Cole had briefed them. Or they dressed in silence and drove to the venue in 2 cars. The wedding hall was breathtaking. Chandeliers cascaded light across every surface. 220 guests filled rows of gold chairs dressed with white ribbon. Soft orchestral music played from somewhere overhead. The florist had done extraordinary work. Everything looked exactly like what it was supposed to be. A celebration. A beginning. Nathan walked to the front of the hall and sat in his chair at the altar. He did not wave at the guests he recognized. He did not smile at his cousins in the 3rd row or his colleagues who had flown in from the United States and the UK specifically for this day. He sat with his hands in his lap and his eyes on the doorway and his face composed into something calm and unreadable. People whispered, Is he nervous? He looks a little pale. First day jitters, completely normal. Then the music shifted and the doors at the back of the hall opened wide and Diane walked in. She was devastating. The gown was ivory silk, perfectly fitted, with a train that whispered across the floor behind her. Her hair was pinned up with pearl details threaded through it. She moved down the aisle slowly, deliberately, smiling at the guests on either side with the ease of someone who had never doubted for a second that this moment was hers. She reached the front and settled into her chair beside Nathan. She leaned toward him and whispered his name. He said nothing. She touched his hand. He did not move. The smile on her face shifted almost imperceptibly. A flicker. Gone in a second. The officiant stepped forward and opened with a warm smile at the room. Good morning, everyone. We are gathered here today. Nathan raised his hand. The officiant stopped. The room turned as one. Nathan stood. He faced the crowd. When he spoke, his voice was even and clear and reached every corner of that enormous hall without him needing to raise it. Before we begin, he said, I'd like to share something with the woman I'm about to marry. A small surprise. Something I think this whole room should hear. The crowd responded with warmth immediately. Laughter, applause, phones rising. Someone near the back called out, "Aw!" A woman in the 5th row leaned to her neighbor with a delighted smile. A guest who had come all the way from Canada whispered to her husband, "He prepared something. How sweet." Diane looked up at Nathan. She settled her hands in her lap. She was expecting flowers. A poem, a song perhaps, as she was smiling. Nathan turned quietly to the audiovisual team stationed to the right of the stage. He gave one small nod. Cole, from his seat in the front row of groomsmen, gave a nod to the technician. The technician pressed play, and Diane's voice came through every speaker in that hall, warm and clear and completely damning. Can you believe he was complaining about Rex again? He doesn't even realize Rex is just jealous. That dog sees everything. He knows things Nathan will never figure out. The hall went very still. Nathan works all the time. He could never satisfy me the way Rex does. I've stayed this long because of the house and everything he's built. But I'm not staying forever. I'll marry him, give it some time, then file for divorce and take everything I'm entitled to. Half his assets, the house, all of it. My lawyer already knows what to do. A sound passed through the crowd like a wave. Not a scream. Something more stunned than that. The sound 220 people make when something they cannot immediately process enters their ears. And after all of that, I go straight back to Ryan. He's the only man I have ever actually loved. Ryan knows it. I know it. This whole thing with Nathan is just the plan. The hall broke. Gasps erupted across every row. A woman near the aisle covered her face with both hands. A man in the second row stood up involuntarily. Phones that had been recording for a sweet speech were now recording something else entirely. Diane's mother made a sound nobody in that hall will ever describe accurately. The maid of honor knocked over the bridesmaid beside her, stepping backward in shock. Someone dropped their phone and the sound of it hitting the floor was somehow audible over everything else. And Diane. Diane sat in her ivory silk gown with both hands pressed flat on her knees and her face the color of old paper. She could feel every eye in that room. She could feel her mother's eyes. She could feel the eyes of Nathan's family who had flown in from Melbourne and Toronto and London and Atlanta. She could feel the eyes of people she had never met and would never meet again, all of them carrying the same expression. She wanted to stand, and she could not stand. She wanted to speak, and nothing came. Nathan stood before the crowd. He reached into his breast pocket with a hand that trembled only slightly and removed a pair of dark sunglasses. He put them on. Not for effect, yet the tears had arrived, and he would give this moment no more of his grief than he had already given it. He looked at the room one final time. Then he turned and walked out of the wedding hall through the main doors. Behind him, Diane slid sideways from her chair and collapsed to the floor in a faint. The hall erupted into chaos. If this story has you gripped right now, stop what you're doing and subscribe to this channel. Hit the like button and drop a comment below. Tell me, were you shocked by what Rex was really reacting to? Tell me where you're watching from. I want to hear from you in Australia, Canada, the US, the UK, everywhere. Now let's continue. Nathan's house felt like a museum when he got home. He came through the front door in his wedding suit and sat on the bottom stair and stayed there for a long time. The flowers he had ordered for the house after the wedding were still on the kitchen table in their wrapping. The champagne he had bought for the evening was in the fridge. Everything was set for a celebration that would never happen. He sat on that stair and he cried. Not quietly. Not with any attempt at dignity. He cried the way a man cries when he is completely alone, and the pain is too large to hold inside the body anymore. Deep, shaking sobs that came from somewhere below grief. From the place where trust lives before it gets destroyed. He cried for the 2 years. For the ring he had saved 4 months to buy. For every conversation at midnight about the future. For the house he had built partly with her in mind. For the version of his life he had believed in completely. Outside, Cole came and knocked. Nathan did not answer. Yeah, his phone rang 15 times. He did not answer. His mother, who had flown all the way from Melbourne, sat outside his door for 2 hours and spoke to him softly through the wood until she finally heard him cry. And then she stayed silent and simply did not leave. And that was the most comforting thing she could have done. Days passed. Then, weeks. Nathan stopped going to his office. He ate poorly. He slept in fragments. He replayed the recording in his head on a loop, not the words exactly, but the tone, the casualness of it, the plan, the lawyer, Ryan. His mind went to Rex again. The dog had always known. And the line that haunted him most, "He could never satisfy me the way Rex does," took on new, darker meanings in the silence of his empty house that he spent a long time trying not to think about too directly. What had Rex been reacting to? What had he been protecting? What had actually been happening in that house? Nathan pressed his palms against his eyes and told himself it didn't matter anymore. Whatever had been happening, it was over. She was gone. The truth was on record. But the shame didn't go with her. The footage had gone everywhere. He had become a story, a video, a comment section full of strangers weighing in on the worst night of his life. Some were sympathetic, many were not. A few called him cruel for the public reveal. Some called him weak for not seeing it sooner. He stopped looking at his phone entirely. He needed to leave. One morning, 6 weeks after the wedding, he packed a single bag. He told Cole only. He drove 4 hours to a smaller coastal city, a developing area where the streets were busy near the port and quiet everywhere else, where no one had seen the video and no one knew his face. He rented a plain, one-bedroom flat from an older woman who cooked on the landing and minded her business completely. He wore simple clothes. He walked to the market. He sat in a small cafe and read books he had been meaning to read for years. He started sleeping properly again. He started feeling like a person rather than a headline. He was not happy, but he was becoming okay. And then, on an otherwise unremarkable Wednesday afternoon, a car drove through a puddle and landed him in the path of the woman who would change everything. He was crossing the main road near the morning market, 2 bags of groceries in hand, when a dark blue sedan came fast around the corner and hit a wide pothole directly beside him. The muddy water hit him in a wave, shoulder to shoe, and he stood completely still on the pavement, soaked and gray, bags still in both hands, blinking. The car stopped hard 20 meters up the road. The door flew open. A young woman in a yellow dress ran back toward him at speed. Oh no, I'm so sorry," she said, arriving in front of him breathless, hands already out. "I was late and I wasn't looking properly at the road. Are you hurt? Did it get in your eyes? Are you okay?" Nathan looked at her. "I'm fine, it's just water." "It's not just water, you're covered," she said. She turned and jogged back to the car, opened the rear door, returned with a clean towel. She held it out and then, when he didn't take it immediately, she started pressing it carefully against the mud on his sleeve herself. Nathan watched her do this. "You really don't have to." "I want to," she said simply, not looking up from what she was doing. He looked at the top of her head. She had a focused, unhurried kind of energy. Like someone who, having caused a problem, was going to fix it completely rather than symbolically. "Thank you," he said, when she straightened. Genuinely. She handed him the towel and looked up at him with a slightly embarrassed smile. "I hope the rest of your day is much better than this part." Then she went back to her car and drove away. Nathan stood on the pavement in the afternoon sun, holding a muddy towel belonging to a stranger. He did not know her name. He had not asked. He had been too caught off guard by the simple decency of it. Now, the way she had not just apologized and driven away, the way most people would have, but had actually stopped and come back and done something about it, with her own towel, without being asked. He thought about her for days afterward, without fully admitting that was what he was doing. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, he came out of a small grocery store squinting into the sun, and there she was across the road, standing outside a fabric shop holding a bolt of material against herself and laughing at something her companion had said. He crossed the road before he had consciously decided to. She looked up when he was a few steps away and her face opened into recognition. "The puddle," she said. "The puddle," he confirmed. She laughed. "I still feel bad about that." "Don't," he said. It was the most interesting thing that happened to me that week." Her companion stepped forward with a smile. "I'm Mara, her best friend." "Nathan." "And I'm Sophie," the woman in the yellow dress said, extending her hand. They talked for 20 minutes on that pavement, and it felt like 5. Sophie laughed with her whole face and listened with her whole attention and said things that were honest without being performed. Nathan found himself relaxed in a way he had not been in months, just standing on a street in the sun talking to someone he had met through a puddle. He asked for her number before she could leave. She gave it without hesitating. Mara smiled quietly at the ground. They started talking every day. Morning texts, evening calls that stretched well past midnight. They met at the cafe near the market, then at a small park by the water, then just walking slowly through the evening streets talking about everything and nothing. Sophie was originally from the United States, from a small city in Georgia, and had relocated to Nigeria 3 years ago for work in community development. She had a calm intelligence about her and a way of asking questions that made Nathan feel that the answers actually mattered to her. She never pushed. She never performed. She was simply, consistently, genuinely herself. Nathan felt something stir back to life inside his chest that he had quietly assumed was gone. He did not tell her about the wedding. Not yet. He wasn't ready to be that story again. One evening, walking back from the cafe, he asked her if she would like to go out properly. Dinner, somewhere nicer. Just the two of them. Sophie smiled. I'd really like that, she said. Then she paused. Would it be all right if Mara came? She's going through something difficult right now and I don't want to leave her alone. Nathan hesitated only for a moment. Of course, he said. The more the better. But as he walked home that night, something quiet and careful in the back of his mind whispered, "Pay attention." He didn't know yet how right that small voice was. The day of the outing arrived. Nathan was nervous in a way that felt both ridiculous and completely understandable. He wore a clean shirt. He combed his hair twice. He drove across town in the modest old car he had been using since relocating, the paint fading slightly on the hood, the radio functional on good days only, but reliable enough to get where it needed to go. He parked outside Sophie's house and honked once. Sophie's curtain moved upstairs. A moment later, he heard voices through the window. Sophie's and another. Higher, sharper. Is that the car he brought? A pause. Sophie, I can't get into that. That is embarrassing. Sophie's voice, quieter. Mara, stop. It moves. That's all that matters. I am not sitting in that thing. What will people think? They'll think we're going out with a kind man who invited us to lunch. Come on. Another pause. Then the sound of heels on stairs. They came out together. Sophie wore a simple dress, her hair loose. She smiled when she saw Nathan and walked to the car naturally. Mara followed, her expression arranged into something polite, but barely concealing what was underneath. Hi, ladies, Nathan said as they settled in. You both look lovely. Thank you, Sophie said warmly. Mara said nothing. Now Nathan drove them to a small restaurant, clean and neat and quiet, with tables near the window and a menu that was honest and affordable. A waiter arrived with a notepad. I'll have the grilled chicken and rice, Nathan said. And water, please. Sophie ordered the same, simply. Mara leaned back in her chair and looked at the menu with the deliberate attention of someone who had decided to make a point. I'll have the rice, the grilled fish, the chicken, a side salad, the mixed appetizer platter, and your most expensive bottle of wine. Oh, and dessert. The chocolate one. Sophie closed her eyes briefly. Nathan kept his expression neutral. The food came. They ate. The conversation between Nathan and Sophie was warm despite everything. Mara contributed little and consumed steadily. When the bill arrived, Nathan opened his wallet and counted what he had. His heart sank quietly. He leaned toward Sophie and said in a low voice, I'm a little short. I'm sorry. Could you help me with just a small amount to cover the difference? Sophie started to open her bag immediately. No hesitation, no expression change. But Mara had heard. She turned in her chair with an expression that could have stripped paint. You brought us out to a restaurant not knowing if you had enough money to pay? Her voice was not quiet. The table next to them went still. Sophie grabbed Mara's arm under the table. Stop it, she whispered sharply. You're embarrassing him. He's embarrassing himself, Mara said. Sophie quietly passed her own money to Nathan under the table. Nathan took it, combined it with his own, and paid the bill without looking up. The walk back to the car was silent. On the drive home, they passed through a busy intersection. A white luxury car pulled up alongside them at the light, engine purring. The window came down. The man inside was well-dressed, confident, with a thick gold chain and the easy smile of someone accustomed to getting what he asked for. He looked directly at Mara. Hey, beautiful, he said. Can I talk to you for a second? Mara turned toward Nathan without saying a word, opened the car door while the car was still at the light, and stepped out. She walked over to the white car. Nathan watched through the side mirror as she laughed, flipped her hair, and exchanged numbers with the man while standing in the middle of the intersection. When the light changed, she walked back, got into Nathan's car, and looked out the window as if nothing had happened. Thanks for lunch, she said flatly, when Nathan stopped outside their house. Sophie stayed back after Mara went inside. Nathan, she said quietly, I'm really sorry about today, all of it. You don't need to apologize for her, he said. I know, Sophie said, but I want to. She looked at him with steady eyes. Don't let today put you off. You were kind and generous, and she was awful about it, and that is entirely her problem, not yours. Nathan looked at her. You're a good person, Sophie. So are you, she said. That's the point. She went inside. Nathan drove home in silence and sat in his flat for a long time in the dark, not in grief this time, but in thought. Something was building in him. Something that was not yet a plan but was becoming one. Don't go anywhere. See how this is the part where everything starts to shift. Before we continue, if you haven't liked this video yet, do it right now and leave a comment. Tell me, did Mara remind you of anyone you know? Drop it below. Let's keep going. Despite everything that happened at that restaurant, Nathan kept talking to Sophie. Maybe it was because Sophie herself had never been the problem. Maybe it was because that one conversation on the pavement outside the fabric shop had given him something he hadn't felt in a long time, and he wasn't ready to give it up simply because her friend had bad manners. Maybe it was something else entirely. They continued their evening walks, their late phone calls, their quiet coffees at the cafe by the water. Slowly, steadily, the warmth between them deepened into something neither of them named directly, but both of them felt. Sophie gave without asking. When Nathan mentioned offhand that he needed a new shirt, she brought him one 2 days later, folded neatly in a paper bag. When he was ill for 3 days with a fever, she showed up at his flat with food she had cooked herself and sat with him until the fever broke. When he had no money one week and went quiet about it, she did not ask questions. She simply arranged things so the deficit didn't show, not out of pity, but out of care. She loved him. Not the idea of him, not the potential of him. Him. In the worn shoes and the car with the fading paint and the quiet, wounded dignity of a man still rebuilding himself. And Nathan saw it. He felt it every day. He was falling in love with her in the slow, deep, completely convinced way that he had not believed was still available to him. But there was something he had not told her yet. Something large. One afternoon, Nathan sat across from Sophie at the cafe and said quietly, "Can I ask you something serious?" "Of course," she said. "If I asked you to marry me one day," he said carefully, "what would you say?" Sophie looked at him for a long moment. Her face was very still. Then she smiled, softly, genuinely. "I'd say yes," she said. Without hesitation. Nathan exhaled. "Even like this?" "Especially like this," she said. "Because this is who you actually are." Nathan nodded slowly. She didn't know yet that this was not who he actually was. Not entirely. That evening he called Cole. "It's time," Nathan said. Cole was quiet for a moment. Then, You're sure?" "I'm sure. I'll start making the arrangements." 1 week later, Sophie was at home when Nathan called. "Get dressed tonight," he said. "Something nice. I'm picking you up at 7. I want to take you somewhere." "What's the occasion?" Sophie asked. "You'll see." At 7, she stood outside her gate in a soft peach dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, a small gold necklace at her throat. The evening was warm and the street was quiet. She checked her phone. Then she heard it. A low vibration in the ground before she heard the engines. From down the road, a convoy appeared. Long, black, polished SUVs moving in slow formation, their bodywork gleaming under the streetlights. Behind them, 2 sleek luxury saloons. Then another SUV, men in dark suits visible through the windows, small flags on the front hoods catching the evening breeze. People came out of their houses. Neighbors stood at gates. A group of children across the road stopped playing and stared. The convoy came to a stop directly in front of Sophie's gate. The door of the lead vehicle opened. A man in a black suit stepped out, looked around once with the efficient calm of a professional, and walked to the second vehicle. He opened the rear door slowly. Nathan stepped out. Dark navy designer suit. Gleaming leather shoes. A slim gold watch on his wrist. His hair cleanly trimmed, his bearing relaxed and assured. He looked like someone who had always belonged in that car, because he had, and had simply chosen for a long time not to use it. Sophie's mouth fell open. "Nathan," she whispered. "What is this?" He walked toward her calmly. I owe you an explanation," he said. "And an apology. And something else." Sophie could not speak. "I'm not who I presented myself to be," Nathan said. "I'm not poor, Sophie. I never was. I own a mid-size import and export company. These are my cars. These are my staff. The flat I've been renting is not where I live. I chose to live simply because I needed to find out whether someone could love me for who I am, not what I have." He paused. "I've been betrayed before, very badly, and I needed to be sure." Sophie looked at the convoy, then back at Nathan. Her eyes were full. "How long have you known? About me, I mean. How long have you known I was real?" "From the cafe with the muddy towel," he said simply. "But I had to be completely sure, so I waited. And you never gave me a reason to doubt you. Not once." Sophie pressed her hand to her mouth. "Come with me tonight," Nathan said. "There's somewhere I want to take you." She nodded, unable to speak. He opened the car door for her. She stepped inside. The convoy moved. They pulled up 40 minutes later to a large luxury hotel on the waterfront. 5 stars, glass and gold. The kind of building that makes you feel something just looking at it from outside. As Nathan and Sophie stepped through the front doors, staff members in white gloves formed a quiet line. "Good evening, Mr. Nathan." Sophie looked at him sideways. "I own part of this place," he said quietly. Her jaw dropped. A grand piano played softly in the lobby. They were led through a gold-trimmed corridor into a private hall, large and elegant, east with chandeliers and white and gold table settings and crystal vases of fresh flowers. A small, carefully selected group of guests was already seated. Among them, near a table to the left, sat Mara. And beside her, the man from the white luxury car. His name, Nathan knew now, was Derek. He had been Nathan's driver for 2 years. Mara looked up when Nathan and Sophie walked in. Her expression moved through several things quickly. Confusion. Recognition. Reassessment. "Is that Nathan?" she whispered. Derek looked at the man walking across the room toward the stage. He stood immediately and gave a small, respectful bow. "Good evening, boss." Mara turned her head so sharply her neck cracked. "What did you just say?" Derek kept his eyes forward. "I said, 'Good evening, boss. That's Mr. Nathan, my employer.'" Mara's face went through several more things. "You're his driver?" "Yes," Derek said simply. "I work for him. I have for 2 years." Mara stood up from her chair. Her legs were not entirely steady. "Then the white car is his," Derek said. "One of several." Mara's hand went to her mouth. Nathan stood at the front of the hall and turned to face the room. His voice was calm and clear. "Some of you know why you're here. Some of you are finding out now." He looked at Mara directly. "I needed to understand what kind of person you were when you thought I had nothing. You showed me very clearly. So did someone else." He turned to Sophie. He took a slow breath. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and removed a small black velvet box. He lowered himself onto one knee. The room went completely still. Sophie covered her mouth. Her eyes filled immediately. "Sophie," Nathan said, opening the box. The diamond inside caught the light of every chandelier in that hall. "You gave me your kindness when I looked like nothing. You gave me your time when I seemed to have nothing to offer. You defended my dignity when someone tried to take it. You loved me without knowing what I had, which means you loved me." He paused. "Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me?" Before Sophie could answer, Mara pushed back from her chair and stood. "No," she said. Her voice was shaking. "Sophie, don't, please. He came for me first. We were talking. You know that. Sophie, please." Sophie looked at her slowly. Her voice was gentle but absolutely certain. "Mara, he didn't choose me because he rejected you. He chose me because I loved him when he had nothing. That's the difference." She turned back to Nathan. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." The room erupted. Applause, cheers, a few tears from guests who had come knowing this moment was coming. Nathan slid the ring onto Sophie's finger and stood and pulled her into his arms and held her there while the noise rose around them. Mara sat back down heavily in her chair. Then she stood again. Faster. Her hands were shaking. She grabbed the edge of the nearest table and shoved it sideways. Wine glasses tipped. A bottle of red wine crashed to the floor and shattered. She picked up her chair. Security was faster. 2 large men in black suits, reached her before the chair left the ground. They each took an arm, firmly and professionally. "Please come with us, ma'am," one said. "Why, get off me," Mara screamed. "Get off! You don't know what you're doing. Sophie! Sophie, look at me! Sophie!" They walked her out through the side door. The room watched in silence. The sound of her voice faded down the corridor. Nathan held Sophie close. She was trembling slightly, not from fear, from everything. From the proposal, from the revelation, from the enormity of the evening. "Are you okay?" he asked her quietly. "I think so," she whispered. "I think I'm very okay." He smiled. He kissed her forehead. Then the service door at the back of the hall opened. A young woman came in carrying a mop and a bucket. She wore a pale gray cleaning apron. Her hair was tied back. She walked slowly toward the broken glass and spilled wine near the overturned table, her eyes on the floor. Then she looked up, and she stopped completely. Her name was Diane. She was thinner than she had been on their wedding day. Her skin was dull. The circles under her eyes were deep and dark. She looked older than her age in the way that people do when something has taken a long time to go through them. The gown and the flowers and the ivory train were all gone. In their place was a faded apron and a mop bucket and the quiet uniform of someone who had come down very far from where she had been standing. She looked at Nathan across that hall. He looked back at her. Her lips trembled. Her hands tightened on the mop handle. Then, without a word, she turned and walked quickly back through the service door. The door swung shut behind her. A moment later, from somewhere down that corridor, the sound of crying. Faint, real, the kind that comes when there is no audience left to perform for. Sophie turned to Nathan. "Who was that?" Nathan looked at the door for a moment. Then he turned back to Sophie and took both her hands in his. "Someone who taught me what love is not," he said quietly. "So that when the real thing arrived, I would know exactly what I was looking at." Sophie held his gaze. He smiled. She smiled back. And in that hall, surrounded by light and by people who had come to witness something true, Nathan finally felt the weight he had been carrying since that hotel corridor lift completely from his chest. It did not happen loudly. It did not announce itself. It simply left. And what remained in its place was something quiet and solid and full. The specific piece of a man who had lost everything, rebuilt himself in the dark, and come through the other side into something real. And that, my friends, is where Nathan's story ends. Not in bitterness, not in revenge for its own sake, but in truth. In the quiet and complete justice of a life that finally matched the man living it. Diane had planned to use Nathan's love to take everything he had built and walk away to another man. She did not succeed. She lost not just the wedding and the house and the future she had mapped out, but the version of herself that could look in a mirror without flinching. That is a consequence she will carry far longer than any legal settlement. And Ryan, the man she called the only love of her life while Nathan stood outside that door? He got exactly what he was promised. A woman whose loyalty has a price tag. He is welcome to her. Now, before you scroll away, I want to say something directly to you. If you watched this entire story and felt something, if you felt Nathan's pain in that corridor, if you cheered when the recording played in that hall, if you smiled when Sophie said yes, then this channel is yours. Subscribe right now. Hit the like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear a story about love that survives the worst kind of betrayal. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I want to hear from every single person watching in the United States, in Canada, in Australia, in the United Kingdom, and everywhere else in this world. And one last thing, if you watch this whole story and you don't like it, don't comment, don't share it, and don't subscribe, then in the spirit of this story, that silence means you're on Diane's side. It means you're okay with what she did. It means you support a woman who looked a good man in the eyes every single day, called him her love, planned their wedding, and was secretly arranging to rob him of everything he had built while planning to return to another man the moment the paperwork was done. We don't believe you're that person. So, hit subscribe, hit like, leave a comment, share this with someone. Because Nathan's story deserves to be heard, and so does yours. Thank you for watching.